Welcome to the Cognitive Crucible, produced by the Information Professionals Association. Our website is information-professionals.org, where you can find links and information about today's conversation and get access to members-only content. Join John Bicknell and explore all aspects of our generational challenge, cognitive security. The Cognitive Crucible is a forum that presents different perspectives and emerging thought leadership related to the information environment. The opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of or endorsement by the Information Professionals Association.
My guest today on the Cognitive Crucible is John Cappello, who is a 25-year veteran of the United States Air Force and is a founding partner and chief operations officer for the Balkan Security Network, or BSN. John Cappello, welcome to the Cognitive Crucible.
Thanks, John. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and by the way, shout out to Josh Siegel, who introduced us and has been very helpful for introducing us to a number of great guests such as yourself, John. So the conversation that I'd like to have with you today will cover your perspectives regarding the Balkans region of Europe and why Western national security practitioners should have a working knowledge of this important region. But before we get into this topic, could we start by getting your assessment of our strategic landscape?
Sure. It's a great question, and I'll give you my perspective from the foxhole here in my foxhole in the Balkans.
Yeah, and you are in Belgrade right now. Is that correct?
I am. That's correct. Yep, I'm sitting here in lovely Belgrade at the moment. But I would argue that the challenges we see here and that we're confronted with here are not much different than the challenges, globally. The region is a microcosm of a lot of the uncertainties that are faced that we face globally. When I have conversations here, the anxieties, the worries, they range everywhere from concerns of the rules-based order, which we hear about oftentimes today, all the way down to the serious discussions concerning information and disinformation. And this is something we're focused on with BSN. I've seen survey after survey talking about disinformation and the information space and battles as being one of the top most dangerous threats. And disinformation always ranks high. I don't think I've seen it outside of the top 10 concerns when we talk about global challenges. But in so many of the conversations I have here, why does it seem not to be treated as a top 10 challenge? Many people ask, why are we not discussing this? Why are we not doing something, specific, measurable on it? And I think there's a real lack of recognition of the problem. It's maybe not seen as a priority. It's not seen as a major threat. So the proper resources might not be allocated, and there's a seemingly not a lack of willingness to act. There are considerable battles, and we see considerable battles here. We see it globally, I think, over the control for narratives. We see it again in the local context. We see it globally, and this isn't new. I don't think it's this is decades and decades of influence campaigns, of focus on undermining trust in institutions, distorting facts, seeking to divide both societies from within and then amongst societies. Right? We see this desire to drive wedges between our societies. The weaponization of information and narratives and it's not limited by geography. This is something that we see in spades here. Information has tremendous influence over our society. We rely on information, right? And then you throw in the influence of technology, which is advancing at lightning speeds. And then you have a real recipe for potential disasters in a real threatening environment. While we could argue, I'll hold up my phone and it's an amazing tool, right? What a force for good for education, medical advances, and the like. We could look up anything and within seconds have data on that, have information and data. But there's a serious challenge and a serious threat by those who want to manipulate that that information and manipulate it for malign actions. We see a real poisoning of the information environment, the ability to manipulate information is growing at an alarming rate, and it's making it very difficult to obtain good information. And this complicates, of course, decision-making processes. It's hard to operate with certainty. Again, I mentioned, erodes trust and credibility in the information within institutions, and then trust among partners and allies.
Right. So maybe we could start getting, John,
Sure.
into what the Balkans region is. And, by the way, is it Balkan? When do you and when do you not use the S? And or is that I don't want to trivialize anything, but is that an important distinction to make?
Well, I mean, our name Balkan Security Network is, the Balkan region. When we talk about that region, it's an interesting. You're raising a very interesting question, because many of those who, in the past in history, were considered Balkan nations, shy away from that label.
Putting an S on the end of it.
Yeah.
Okay. So Balkan is preferred. Okay.
So the definition. I mean, many that again who are historically part of the region. It's a very emotional and a very emotional issue. The Balkanization is often used as a kind of pejorative and negative label, right?
What does that mean when someone says Balkanization?
Well, we often think about the breakup, the dissolution, the chaos and uncertainty that follows these breakups. So we'll talk about the Balkanization of a region. The breakup, the chaos that follows, and it often is used with a negative connotation.
Yeah.
Here we try to take a practical approach, and we're focused on the part of Southeast Europe that where the integration of that region is not fully fulfilled. So the Western Balkans still on a path towards integration, but those post-Cold War efforts are not complete. Right.
What are the some of the locations that people would recognize where they can help orient on?
Sure. So I mean, we look at the old Yugoslavia after it dissolved in the 90s. You had Croatia and Slovenia, which pretty rapidly integrated into the European space, both in the European Union and into NATO. The Western Balkans, the other countries that haven't fully integrated yet, Serbia, North Macedonia, Montenegro, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and then of course the breakup of Serbia into Kosovo. So that's that Western Balkans region that's not fully integrated into the European space is where we continue to operate. I mean, I remember, it's not that long ago, President Bush talked about a Europe that's whole, free, and at peace. And while the integration in Southeast Europe has moved along, I think pretty successfully. We look at Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, all these countries in Southeast Europe that have integrated into the Euro-Atlantic space. The job's still not done, and the Western Balkans is still on that path.
So not all of those countries are part of the European Union, is what you're saying?
Right, correct. It's a mix, right? So we have Montenegro, North Macedonia, who are part of NATO, but haven't integrated or assessed into the European Union yet. Serbia is expressed its in its strategic interest and goal to be part of the European Union, and so it's on that path as well, as our Bosnia-Herzegovina.
Right.
So it's
yeah. As we said up at the top, you're the Chief of Operations at the Balkan Security Network, and we'll have a link to your organization in the show notes. Could you tell our audience about the Balkan Security Network?
Sure. So we're in a nutshell, we're an organization that's focused on normalizing the conversation of defense and security issues in the region. and there's a reason why we focus on defense and security, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But we define security issues we cast a pretty wide net. So it's not just military defense issues, but border security, migration issues, disaster response, economic security, other human security issues, because those are challenges that that are very emotional and often exploited the most. We found in the region, given the challenges of the 1990s and the history, those issues become those that have been sensationalized probably the most. I mean, you have daily politics, which is pretty sensational. We stay out of the daily politics in the region, but the defense and security issues are highly sensationalized. You see a large tendency to develop narratives that are anti-EU, anti-West, anti-NATO, anti-US, conjuring up old ethnic hatreds and attempting to maintain instability in the region. And so the other challenge here is that, of course, the audience here is somewhat susceptible to that, given, again, this emotion of the 1990s. So it's a very complex information space, of some dichotomies here, but that's the space in which we operate.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to ask you about that next. Yeah, so what is it that makes this area of Europe so complex? Yeah, take as much time as you like. I'm sure that I mean, there's a rich history here, obviously.
Well, I mean, yeah, this is a whole a whole course on the history of the Balkans. Um, uh, it's and just big picture, right? It sits in a very traditionally strategic location at the crossroads of over centuries of between civilizations, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, between the Eastern Church, the Western Church, the Ottoman and the Christian churches. So it literally, I mean, I'm just a few hundred meters away from the Danube and the Sava rivers, which were the literal borderlines between civilizations. So we could go back hundreds and hundreds of years, but we don't have to go back too many years. Both during the First World War and the Second World War led to many unresolved challenges that were manipulated after the fall of the Soviet Union, after the fall of Yugoslavia. And some of these outside influences have not been reduced. As a matter of fact, they've been emboldened, and so these challenges remain. You have a population that, in many respects, wants to be part of the European space. They do. They want to integrate into the European space, but recent history raises many questions among residents of the area. Why were we bomb Kosovo, NATO? And so these issues, very emotional and very easily manipulated, with many false narratives and disinformation.
Right. Well, you and I, we had a pre-game discussion, and you unpack that a little bit more. I found it really interesting and helpful. Do you think you could, you know, pull the string on that a little bit more as to, how, I mean, Russia in particular, right, is using the uh, the U.S. efforts in the 1980s and 1990s, and turning that around.
So yes, and this a very complex time. A lot of manipulation of the actual history, but it's really important to kind of just like one step back, and understand kind of I mean, look, the media space is under threat and under challenge everywhere in the world, but it's particularly dysfunctional in the Western Balkans, for a number of different reasons. Many of them for economic reasons. I mean, there's a there's a tremendous lack of resources, but a tremendous need for information, content, daily basis, and so you often have outside influences providing information in a sensational manner, and so you match this dysfunction, the introduction of false narratives, with an audience that's somewhat susceptible to hearing those narratives, right? Because look, we could walk down the street and we'll see, the Ministry of Defense still is standing with holes from 1999, right, where bombs hit, and so this emotion mixed with this very visceral battle in the information space makes it a challenge. So when we talk about
this is all still very much in living memory, and I mean not World War II living memory, but the late 1990s, as you were just saying.
Right, which is very, you bring up an important point when we talk about World War II as an example, right? Serbia, or the Serbs were allies during both World War One and World War II, right? So there's a strong history of partnership and alliance between the United States and Serbia. But we often look through the lens of the 1990s at the relationship, and that has been because it's recent, and there's a living memory. But I would argue also because it's manipulated. So an interesting part of what we do, and an interesting challenge, because look, the approach to this conversation is much different, say, in the Baltic states or Poland or Ukraine than it is here, because the threat is seen differently, and the relationship between, say, Serbia and Russia is seen differently. That's not to say, that is to say that the approach for us is not. This is not an anti-Russia effort. It can't be, right? This is a relationship. This is an effort to affect attitudes and behaviors, and attitudes and perceptions of an audience that's receiving bad information, and by sharing both fact-based news and analysis on defense and security issues, and on our historic connections, we're able to affect some movement in those attitudes and perceptions.
Why is it not an anti-Russia effort? Or I'm not quite understanding what you mean by that.
Well, it's it's not directly, because that doesn't the audience would not be receptive to that, right? Even though the relationship between the United States and Serbia, or the United States and Bosnia, or the United States and Macedonia goes directly between the United States and those countries, right? The Russian, by being proactive, and aggressively so, in developing our narrative, in developing the bilateral narrative and relationship, we then control. We're not reactive to what others are doing, and that's a very important component of this. Because if we're sitting here reacting, we're losing time and effort, and it's not the most effective approach in this region, where there's receptiveness to certain outside influences.
Right. Is it the notion that if you are like on defensive, or if you're attacking back, then you're losing? That or that is a not an especially fruitful approach towards influencing the people that you would really like to influence positively.
I mean, of course, there's a time and a place to respond to a very clearly outside or negative, malign efforts, but I think you're absolutely right. It's a um, we don't want anyone else to define
Hmm.
the narrative, the relationship on their terms by being proactive and talking about our shared number one, our strong, long shared history, and the fact that that history actually really has resulted in a strong partnership in many areas today. If you look at the relationship, the military to military relationship, the business to business, these are all things that are growing, but you don't read about it. And why don't you read about it? Because we're not we, the big we, the collective we, are not doing enough to focus on those collective wins
Right,
as developing narratives.
right,
So
right. So what are some of the biggest problems that you guys are working on right now?
I mean, the biggest challenge that we're facing is uh, is the scale. Is the scale. I mean, if I shared a photo of the newsstand right today, or if we go online and look at a lot of the websites, you'll see the sensational nature of the news. Um, part of it is again very sensational local politics, but the security aspects of the media space, very sensational, and the dearth of uh, fact-based, uh, newsworthy news and analysis is the biggest challenge. When we first started this, really, we started in operating in 2018 or so. Um, I was met by a lot of skepticism back in some of the Western capitals that we would not be able to operate. They won't. The media's controlled. They won't allow you to publish any fact-based news and analysis. Well, what I'm going to tell you is that every single thing we've ever produced has been republished and rebroadcast, not just in Serbia, but throughout the region. And that indicates to me a strong need and desire uh, for facts and good quality content. A news release or a press release from the Department of Defense or the Ministry of Defense here goes right into the trash because it's not newsworthy.
Mm.
Our team of analysts, editors, journalists, they're able to make the connection between an issue, a border security issue, a disaster response issue, and people's everyday lives. So we're able to provide positive, uh, positive, again, fact-based and newsworthy content to the media across the media spectrum, reaching audiences that we wouldn't be able to. And now the key is, this needs to be consistent and it needs to be persistent. It needs to be done to a scale where it has an effect. I could send you clips of the things we're doing, but it pales in comparison to the normal information environment.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. That sounds like you guys have a very full plate, but obviously working on a very important problem set. If anyone in our audience wants to get involved, what are things that they can do?
I mean, one of the biggest things, and we've chatted about this, but and I share this with everybody that I come in contact with is this. We talk quite a bit about all of government approach, all of society approach. So building networks of like-minded organizations and institutions is so important because we have so much to share with each other. I mean, at the end of the day, the other side is very clear in their approach and very very active. But we have a tendency in the Western United States to kind of stovepipe our efforts, and we have big systems. I mean, there's no doubt about it. We have many organizations, many institutions that are focused on these things, and tend to get kind of focused. I would argue that the more that we're able to collaborate, look, we're in a living laboratory of information, um, uh, of the battle in the information space, and being able to collaborate with others in other places, whether it's in academia, in non-governmentals, or in government organizations, to be able to share experiences, approaches, is really, really important. So we're very happy to collaborate and share our experience, so that we all could kind of move forward in this environment.
Right. This has been great, John. So wrapping up, I'd like to see if you could offer a fruitful research question that's related to your work that perhaps an interested student or researcher might explore if they want to help advance something productive in this space.
Oh wow, yeah, that's a great question. And if anybody is interested in in doing research, please do reach out and contact. I'd love to help out and have you be part of this. Thing looking very specifically at how actors use disinformation to influence social dynamics in the Western Balkans is something that would be very interesting. What are the primary narratives and tactics used in disinformation campaigns? I think that's another area that we try to build an understanding so that we know what works for us and what doesn't. Um, how the result of the disinformation efforts, how they um, impact the trust in institutions and the trust uh, between actors both in the region and outside of the region. I think those are all uh, really important questions. And then what strategies uh, have been effective or used in countering disinformation, and how we might adjust those strategies and approaches. So those
Okay.
are all uh, really practical areas that need some further examination and discussion, I would argue.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic for sure. And yeah, so if anybody is interested, they can get a hold of you, John. What's the best way to get a hold of you if they would like?
Yeah, my email, john@balkansecurity.org. You could share that. You have that information. Please feel free to share it with your listeners and organization. So again,
Right.
it's
We
a
also have a link to your website, balkansecurity.org, will be in the show notes, and I'm sure that they can reach out that way as well. And lastly, John, could you recommend a good book or maybe an online resource that interested listeners might check out if they want to learn more about this region and these kinds of problem sets?
Yeah, there's so much. There's something I'm going to reach over and grab this. This is something. It's not so much a regional, but it really puts so much of this in the historic context. And I think it's helped me really
Hmm.
to um, understand the big picture. It's called Parting the Curtain, uh, and the author is Walter Hickson.
Okay.
It's about propaganda culture in the Cold War, actually. So the really, as I go through that, it just becomes so evident that we're not facing new challenges. We're facing so many of the old challenges. Um, and then
Okay.
Tim Judah, I highly recommend his analysis of the region. He provides some. He's written a couple of things, a couple of different books. He's a journalist for the Economist, actually, and he's written a couple of very uh, in-depth analysis of the history of the region. So I highly recommend Tim as well.
All right. Excellent suggestions. And we'll have links to those resources in the show notes. And with that, John Cappello, thank you so much for being a guest on the Cognitive Crucible.
John, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I look forward to continuing the conversation.
The Cognitive Crucible is the only podcast dedicated to increasing interdisciplinary collaboration between information operations practitioners, scholars, and policymakers. To find out more about the Information Professionals Association, visit us at information-professionals.org. Please support our podcast by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review.